another episode of Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. I'm your host Avik, and today we are stepping into a topic that's becoming more and more relevant. It is the choice to stop drinking alcohol, not from a place of pressure, but from a place of self awareness, mental health, and intentional living. So, my guest today is, please welcome Michelle. Welcome to the show, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me, Avik. I'm excited to chat about this today.
Amazing. So, dear listeners, before we delve deep into the discussion today, I would love to introduce you with Michelle. So, Michelle is the visionary founder of To Be Honest Beverage Company, a brand reimagining drinking culture with mindful, non alcoholic functional spirits. So, her journey began when she pressed pause on drinking to manage her own struggles with the mental health and the anxiety. So, what started as a personal experiment, it actually grew into a movement and a purpose driven brand that gives people permission to be the main character of their story. So, without the hangovers, peer pressure, or compromise. So, I'll not take much of your time, dear listeners. Let's get started. And, Michelle, it's really, really such a joy to have you here today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that beautiful intro. Yes, it was a personal story that eventually became a business. And, it's something that I've learned connects with so many people because drinking is such a cultural experience for a lot of us. I'm based here in the US, and it's a part of everyday life, it's a part of celebrations. And so when you are kind of transitioning away, it can be challenging, to address
Mm.
that.
Exactly, exactly. Really lovely to have you here today. And uh, so, like, you have shared that, and you have shared openly that your decision to stop drinking was rooted in the struggles with mental health and the anxiety. So, uh, can you take us back to that moment? Like, what was the turning point when you realized that alcohol wasn't serving you anymore?
Yeah. So, approximately 6 or so years ago, I was starting to experience anxiety attacks and
Mhm.
starting to have signs of like low level depression and experiencing what I would call, mental health struggles of not really
Mm.
being able to identify what was going on or what you would say was quote unquote wrong. At the time, I was in the health profession. So I was full time teaching and coaching around healthy habit formation, functional fitness, and lifestyle. So I felt like I was checking all the boxes with meditation and movement and having a well-rounded whole foods diet, but I was still kind of dealing with all of the mental components of managing life.
Mm.
So I started getting therapy and over the course of the next couple years started figuring out like, what makes me happy? What's going on in my life? We start asking a lot of those more existential questions along the way. And around 3.5 years ago, alcohol was something that was still very persistent in my life because even though I felt like I was leading this quote unquote healthy lifestyle, because alcohol is so integrated, it was,
Yeah.
very common to have a glass of wine with dinner or make a cocktail, or you're meeting friends for happy hour, having a drink to catch up. The events that we would go to would all integrate and highlight alcohol. So it's just such a part of my life that I didn't question. And I
Mm.
actually had someone in my life that I felt like was dealing with more of an addictive relationship with alcohol and struggling to stop once she started drinking. And I wanted to model a certain type of behavior. So that contributed to that experience, along with feeling a lack of motivation, a sense of lethargy, and just kind of unwillingness to focus on my tasks at hand in the days that followed drinking alcohol. So I put a pause on it for a short time just to kind of see what would happen. And that week
Mhm.
turned into a month, became several months, and now multiple years later. And the further I get away from it, just the further I feel like I'm moving toward what I truly want in life and the way that I want to feel about myself and my circumstances.
Amazing. Yep. So, like, was there a part of you that uh, feared life without alcohol, like missing out socially or not fitting in?
Absolutely. This is a conversation I have with a lot of people, and I've done, panel discussions and speaking engagements, and we've hosted special events. And this tends to come up very commonly is that just like I mentioned in terms of drinking being integrated into our culture, celebrations, happy hour, sitting down with your partner or spouse, having people over, and so when you remove drinking, there is a fear. What if people don't accept my choice? What are people going to think about me? What are the assumptions that they'll have? What are the questions that they're going to ask me? What am I going to do instead? Am I going to have the same friend group? Because that was something I experienced is that a lot of my friends at the time were integrated into that lifestyle. So it's not to say that I couldn't spend time with them, but what they were choosing to do was no longer a priority to me. So it does change your relationships. It changes your friendships. It changes your workplace. And, for me, I always knew that the directive of getting away from alcohol was more important to longevity, to my career, to my future as a whole. And that's what I was invested in. And so, a lot of people have reached out to me, other founders, business owners, and consumers, and our clients and customers have reached out and said, "How did you do it? I'm a mom and, I'm so stressed out at the end of the day, like all I want is a glass of wine." And they're all just so many stories and experiences that we all can kind of relate to. But
True.
I think having a meaningful purpose and why behind the decision you're making can really be a grounding factor in changing your habits and lifestyle as a whole, but especially when it comes to drinking.
Ah, exactly true. I really, it's so relatable. Like many people, uh, want to make healthier choices, but worry about like what they will lose. So, definitely, your story reframes it beautifully because it's not about loss. It's all about, uh, the gaining the clarity, energy, and self-respect as well. So, yep.
Yeah, and I think adding things in is such a
Mm,
healthy way to look at lifestyle in general. As a
mm,
health coach, personal trainer, and instructor, a lot of times dealing with clients and individuals when they come to you to make a change was always about, well, what do I have to do? How much do I have to work out? What do I have to eat? What do I have to give up? What do I have to sacrifice? What are the things that I have to change about my life? And it always came about in terms of like a negative way. It's like, oh, I have to give up. Let's just say we'll start with alcohol. I have to give up alcohol. I have to give up my leisurely ways. I have to give up types of food that I really enjoy. I have to give up indulgences. And for some reason, that discipline, that structure can be negative and confining. And so a lot of people see it as a bad thing. When really, when it comes to overall health and wellness, mental health included, the way that I like to approach it is not what you're giving up or sacrificing. So for me, it wasn't really giving up alcohol. And that's part of the reason why we launched the business as a whole. But what can I integrate and add on instead in a positive way? So, what can I welcome in as opposed to cut out? And you can start to kind of replace those things that you want to
mm,
shift, that you want to change. And so for us, that was I loved cocktails. I loved making cocktails at home and having them with my husband and partner. And I like going out to bars and restaurants and having a cocktail. And so that's really where our was built from was about
mm,
mindfulness, intention, choice. What can I bring in to my life that is going to create and cultivate an experience instead of feeling like now I'm missing out on something and I'm giving something up?
got it. Yes, definitely. So, like, how do you personally navigate the conversations with people who just don't get it, or maybe even challenge your choice?
Mhm. You know, Overarching, a lot of the feedback I hear is that we are heading into a time, a movement, a culture where not drinking is much more acceptable. Now, that depends on your location, it depends on your family, it depends on your environment. So, not everything is going to just be a wash across the board, of course.
Mm,
But we are seeing a lot less questioning, right? Where it used to be the case, if you were choosing not to drink when you were going out having dinner with friends or at a certain event, it was either a question of, for me as a female, oh, are you pregnant? And that's why you're not drinking. Or, oh, you have a problem with alcohol and that's why you're not drinking. So it was very siloed, right? It was either you drank
Mhm.
alcohol or you didn't, and there was a specific reason why you didn't. But we're integrating into a time in which the opportunity for not drinking is more of a spectrum. And people are making choices about not consuming alcohol for lots of different reasons. Whether that's they're getting a little bit older and their health is impacted, or they're not able to sleep after they drink alcohol. So they're switching to other options. Whether that is your like Gen Z and younger generations because they're more thoughtful about what they're putting in their bodies, and the impact of alcohol can be really negative
Mhm.
from an after effects, from a hangover perspective, everything that it does to the organs of your body. Two, your millennial parents who don't want to drink around their kids, or you've got to get up, you've got to do a big presentation the next day for work, and you don't want to feel lightly hungover or manage
Yeah.
any of the after effects. So I think that the discussion and in my industry, I live in the non-alcoholic, sober, curious, low to no ABV space from a production perspective, from a brand perspective. And so we have a lot of dialogue within the industry. And then, of course, from a consumer's perspective, you have audience members, you have your community online, you have events that you're going to and speaking with folks. So I get it kind of from both sides of the spectrum, right? And I think that we're just seeing a shift in culture, a shift in the dynamic, a better understanding and acceptance of not drinking, and everyone kind of being okay with it. That being said, we still have folks who reach out to us to tell them about stories that if they're going home to see their family and they're opting for a non alcoholic drink with dinner, they still get flack. People who are saying, "Oh, why are you not drinking?" or "Oh, you're not leveling up to the expectation of what we would expect." I don't want to use any terms that people have shared with me, but it can be kind of negative because people can be made fun of for making those choices, especially when you're in an environment when drinking is so integrated and accepted. For me, navigating those conversations have become so easy. I think in the beginning, when someone starts transitioning away from alcohol or just making more thoughtful choices, right? Because not all of our customers and not everyone just stops drinking altogether. A lot of people are in that kind of more spectrum category or sober curious category where they maybe drink once a week or have a drink at a special event, but they don't drink consistently.
Yes.
And so when people are transitioning, I always advise, just being thoughtful, being short, being concise. I'm not drinking tonight. And that's okay. Like, you don't have to give an explanation. If you do have a more grounded purpose and why, and you feel like sharing that, it actually opens up a really great dialogue between people. I've found that sharing, I was really struggling with mental health and anxiety. And so I chose to stop drinking, and that's improved my overarching psychological experience in life and the way that I approach life. And then it breeds this entire conversation, and we talk about our brand, and people are always kind of inspired by it. And you'd be surprised because more often than not, relationships with alcohol
Mhm.
can absolutely be healthy. But so many people end up sharing with me that they're like, "Oh yeah, I stopped drinking a couple months ago," or "I've done dry January," or "I've definitely thought about cutting back on alcohol," or "I'm thinking about cutting back on alcohol. Like, do you have any tips?" And so you'd be surprised at how many people actually are interested in this topic. And by you having the confidence to guide the narrative, that you can engage people in a very different way than you thought, instead of, I think what typically wants to come out is defensiveness. And so when you can kind of drop that defensiveness, be confident in how you're approaching the situation, and be decided in your choice as opposed to like, maybe I'll drink tonight, maybe I won't drink tonight. If you can be very intentional, that kind of sets the precedent for the conversation.
Exactly. Exactly. And your brand, like to be honest, beverage company, was born from your own search for sophisticated alcohol-free options. So What gap did you see in the market, and how did you know that, this was the right problem to solve?
Yeah, that's a great question because when you're thinking about any particular type of business, I really believe in the problem solution model and having an MVP to a certain extent so that you test, so that you experiment, so that you understand the type of consumer that you're speaking to, and even starting to grow that
Mm,
community and audience before you produce a business, a brand, and go through all the steps and hoops as a part of that process, which is something that we did with our product specifically. We sold our product before we had it in hand. And I think it's important to recognize what is the demand of what you're creating and bringing to the market. I will say, in part, it was due to exactly what I wanted to see and felt like was missing. So if you look at the number two drivers of consumption for beverage products within at least the US market in my data and research, it's flavor and function. So flavor to the extent, of course, that people wanna drink something that typically tastes good. We're not kind of in the era of just pounding things down anymore
mm,
for drinking's sake. People want to enjoy, especially, of course, our market, which includes adults who are at an age and a level of consumption that want to enjoy the experience. And then the second part of that being functionality.
mm,
So, function is any type of benefit that you may experience or get out of that product. So, we're seeing a lot of functional products on the market, and that can be everything from your mushroom based drinks to adaptogens to nootropics to our inaugural style, which is a hemp infused product. So, it does have CBD or
mm,
cannabidiol. And across the board, we found that from a spirits perspective, there were a lot of
okay.
great products on the market, but a lot of them were either watery or lacking the flavor profile to build a complex drink that felt and consumed like a cocktail. And so it either resulted in a very sugary or kind of watered down beverage option. And then on the other side of that, non-alcoholic spirits are fantastic, but when they are just distilled essences, which is ultimately right, if you're removing the ethanol and you don't have the alcohol in the product, you're looking at very fancy water in a nice bottle. And so I
Mm,
think that's why a lot of brands are heading more into the functional route is because at the end of the day, if I order something and want to drink something, I
yeah.
want some type of experience out of it or at least some sort of benefit to it. And so we went with the hemp infused CBD with zero THC. So there's no psychoactive component to it, there's no mind
Okay.
altering substance.
Mm,
Because one, I was dealing with anxiety, and with research backed studies, CBD is demonstrated over time to help manage and mitigate anxiety, as well as I didn't want any buzz, any intoxicant, or any experience that made me felt like
mm,
I was altered. I just wanted that relaxation, stress relief, calm, and a little bit of the anti-inflammatory, a little bit of the sleep, additional quality of being an aid that can come with CBD for most people. It's also very like technically benign in terms of contraindications and potential negative side effects. So as we're seeing a lot of functional products come onto the market, sometimes I do worry that the cons to those substances are more negative than we're giving them credit for, and we'll see where the industry goes, but that was kind of our interpretation, why we designed the product we did, and, what we're hoping to accomplish by having this type of product and offering it to consumers.
mm, very true. Yep. So uh, I really love that because every great brand starts with a kind of personal pain point, and by solving the your own need, you have given others a chance to feel kind of included, respected, and seen as well. So that's a great part of it for sure.
Thank
And
you.
4 years in, yeah, yeah, definitely. So 4 years in, and so what has this alcohol-free journey given you that you didn't expect?
The first thing that actually comes to mind is time. you don't realize how much time is invested in your process of, like, consuming alcohol and what time is to follow. There was actually an interesting interview I saw. I cannot remember, but he's a celebrity talk show host, and I think he was on the Jay Shetty podcast. And he said that when he was drinking, he was always borrowing from tomorrow. And depending on how many drinks he had, it would add on the amount of time that he would have to recover the next day. And so, whether you realize it or not, the alcohol consumption is impacting the quality of your sleep, which affects your energy and your fatigue in the days to
Mm,
follow. It can impact your mental clarity and focus, so it can contribute to brain fog. Maybe you have a headache the next day, just a little bit of lack of attention to detail. And of course, if you end up, consuming either something that just doesn't sit right because maybe it's a poorly produced product or you've overconsumed, which can happen, easily if you're just having fun, you might
mm,
not have any like negative physical after effects because of the experience, but you still feel that quote unquote hangover the next day. And so that will usually lead to maybe you were supposed to work out in the morning, but now you don't, you cancel. Or I've had friends who show up to workouts and they drank the night before and they can't really give it their all or they're not able to do everything that they want to do,
yes,
right?
exactly.
The choice of consumption also leads to your food choices. So, as a domino effect, if you've been drinking, a lot of times will lean more heavily towards greasy food, maybe takeout, maybe you're eating something later than you would like to. It'll change what you eat the next day. So, again, that
Mm,
domino effect, now it's affecting your fitness choices. Now it's affecting your food choices. It's affecting and impairing your sleep quality. So,
mm,
by ripple effect, you're losing a sense of time, energy, and resources invested in this thing that you maybe got a small amount of experience, joy, or connection through.
mm,
And then the other major thing, in addition to time, that I feel like is so important is again, alcohol people can have a healthy relationship with alcohol. I will preface with that. Like, people have a very, again, maybe they drink once a month, they don't engage in all that often. But I was certainly using alcohol as a coping mechanism and tool. I
mm,
never say that I'm sober because I don't feel like I was managing an alcohol use disorder or addiction of any kind. And there, it's very important to distinguish between the two because the experience of those people following those
mm,
realizations can be very different, and I've had lots of conversations who are in that category who would never come close to our product because it too closely resembles alcohol. So, certain products and non-alcoholic or alcohol alternatives are not appropriate for everyone in certain circumstances and when they're making those choices, right?
right.
But but for me, kind of that intentionality, that mindfulness, that sense of presence wasn't available to me because I was choosing alcohol as a coping, avoidance tool and mechanism in response to what I was going through emotionally. So, I don't like to say that alcohol was making me have anxiety attacks. It wasn't causing low-level depression. It wasn't contributing, as the main source altogether, but it was such a part of the experience and it was exacerbating it. It was
Yes.
contributing to it. It was magnifying it to a certain degree. And I wasn't able to address, deeper rooted issues. Like, let's say someone's dealing with childhood trauma, or they're dealing with, scars from choices that they made or things that happened to them, or, just kind of going through life. And we're dealing with a cultural climate, especially here within the US and all across the globe, really. There's a lot of things politically and from a human perspective that we're suffering through and experiencing and watching happen. And so we can experience senses of grief and pain and challenge and
Yeah.
despair. And when you don't address those things, the root cause of what's happening to you, and you choose avoidance and you choose distraction, whether that is social media, whether that is alcohol, whether that is drugs, whether that is food, um, you know, television, movies. There are lots of things that can pull us away from the present moment. And one thing I didn't anticipate and that I found to be very powerful with choosing not to have alcohol because it ripple effect into all of these other places in my life of personal development and growth and, you know, visualization practices and hypnosis and different styles of treatment to deal with like, generational trauma and all of these things that I never imagined myself necessarily getting into, that it created a lot more presence in my life, a lot more acknowledgement of the moment and being in the here and now, creating connections and not distracting myself from what it is that I was going through and what it is that I was experiencing.
Lovely, lovely, great, amazing. And any um any suggestion or advice you'd like to share with the listeners today?
Yeah, if it's on this topic of transitioning away from alcohol, I always like to let people know that typically, as soon as people start to put parameters on themselves, that can be a challenge. Unless you're the type of person who is like, yeah, I'm a black and white, cold turkey. That's the way I sort of am. And so for me, it was not, I'm going to start moderating my relationship with alcohol. I'm just going to have one drink. I'm just going to drink once a week. I don't really have that availability to be in that gray area of consumption. And so for me, it made sense to flip a switch. But the parameter that I didn't put on myself was, okay, I'm not going to drink for a week. I'm not going to drink for a month. I'm not going to drink for a year. I never gave myself a time frame, and I also never told myself that I'm never drinking again. I always leave that opportunity open. That if I
Mhm.
felt inclined to drink, that I would, and that way it would be my choice, and I would be mindful about that. And so I would suggest that if people are approaching this process is
Mm,
one, don't put any harsh parameters around yourself because usually if you break those parameters or if things change, you're going to be so guilty, ashamed, embarrassed about that choice. It's super common in habit formation in general that
mm,
typically it'll lead to like a spiral and then you'll give up. It's why we see a ton of gym memberships around January, February, and then most drop off in the months to follow.
mm,
People don't sustain with those choices and resolutions, but it's typically because they've put too many harsh parameters around what it is that they're doing. The other thing I would really recommend is think about it in terms of integration, adding on.
mm,
So instead of what am I cutting out, what am I doing instead of? How can I find functional alternatives that I really love and enjoy from a flavor perspective that I
mm,
can utilize in replace of that are positive to me. That way I start to build a positive association with other alternatives as opposed to, oh, I'm meeting up with friends. I don't have anything to bring with me. Everybody's going to be drinking. Well, what am I going to do? You're not putting yourself in situations where you're going to feel left out. You're already integrating things in that positive way. And then lastly, I'd say environment, relationships, your circumstances matter so much. So take an assessment of who are the people that you spend the most time with? What are their choices? Are they choosing alcohol more predominantly? What's happening in your workplace? What's happening in your home environment? Do you always have options available at the ready? And so it's just easy, it's just a part of your habit. How can you start to assess and then shift those environments? Do you need to start spending time with different people?
mm,
Do you need to adjust your home environment so that you don't have alcohol at the ready? So, I think those 3 things is
mm.
don't put harsh parameters. Think about it as positive integration and then assess and start to shift your circumstances, your environment. And that's a really good place to start when it comes to making that transition. Again, not just to not drinking altogether, but maybe I don't need to drink by default all the time. And if I don't, okay, what am I going to do instead? And how am I going to approach it, prepare and plan for it?
Amazing. It's really amazing. Oh, lovely. Michelle, I mean, thank you so much for sharing your story, your mission with us. And I would say, like, you have shown us that saying no to alcohol doesn't mean saying no to fun, connection, or sophistication. In fact, it can mean saying yes to energy, mental clarity, and a more intentional life. So, for those who are listening, if you are sober, curious, or simply want to explore mindful alternatives, check out To Be Honest Beverage Company and taste what happens when purpose meets creativity. And Michelle, if someone wants to connect with you, what will be the great medium to connect?
Thank you so much, Avik. Yeah, this has been a great conversation. And if you are interested in learning more, you can follow us at To Be Honest Bev. That's TOBE Honest Bev, BEV is in beverage. On all platforms. And then that's the same for our website. So we only distribute right now within the US, but we'd love for you to follow us. We like to post tips about sober curious, choices, intentionality in terms of lifestyle and living, and just kind of recipes that can also be really fantastic to enjoy so that you have options. And if you'd like to reach out to me individually, just send us a DM and we'd be happy to connect.
Amazing. So great, dear listeners. What I'll do is I'll put all these details and the links into the show notes for your easy reference. And with this hope, until next time, remember that the healthiest choices are often the most courageous ones. And the most powerful way to live is by being the main character in your own story. So thank you so much.